Hi everyone, it's Alicia and welcome back to my YouTube channel, or if you're new here, hello and welcome. For the next couple of videos, I'm going to be catching up on questions that were posed to the Pagan Perspective YouTube channel. As I'm sure many of you know, I like to answer the questions along with the channel, even though I'm not officially affiliated with it in any way or am an official member or anything like that, but it's just a fun thing I like to do, and it also helps me to keep posting regularly, and I just enjoy doing it, and it's nice to interact through doing so with the pagan witchy community on YouTube. And so with that, I'll get to the questions. I'll be answering them sort of out of order, the questions that were posed over this past month, because some of them I feel can go together into one video. The first set of questions talk about permaculture. Do we know what it is? Do we incorporate it into our practice? And another question within that grouping is, what environment do we live in? What climate do we live in? And does that affect our practice? Do we engage within the environment? And how can someone engage with their local surroundings in general as part of their practice? So firstly, permaculture. Do we know what it is? Did we know of it before the video? And honestly, I didn't. I had never heard of it before. I had to look it up, and I honestly don't know much about it, and I don't incorporate it into my practice because it's a philosophy that deals a lot with gardening, and I do not have a green thumb by any means. I'm quite jealous actually of pagans who can grow their own herbs and their own food, because it seems like such a typical witchy thing to do, to be that self-reliant and that relying on the earth to grow your own herbs and food, and to know where your food comes from in that regard because you grew it yourself, and so therefore you can make sure it's really organic, that it comes from a good place. I do not have those skills at all. I have to buy any herbs I use for cooking or spell work and things like that. So as far as using permaculture in the sense of gardening, I don't do that because I don't garden, because the gods did not bless me with those skills. But permaculture's ideas of making sure you don't waste things and trying to use organic materials, I try to do that as much as I can, being a pagan who lives in an urban area. Not necessarily urban, but I live in the heart of a city. I live close to San Diego, and so with that in mind, I try to get out as often as I can out into nature. But doing so is more of a treat for me than a daily or weekly ritual, as I'm sure it is for a lot of modern pagans, because most of us do live in towns or cities or places that are more settled by humans, and so getting really out into nature is often more of a treat as opposed to daily or weekly excursions. And especially for me, being a pagan with a disability, someone who can't drive, someone who is living on unlimited budget, so therefore taking Lyft or Uber or other transportation that costs money, I have to budget that carefully and be very selective about when I go out and where I go out, unless I can carpool with friends or family. And so being able to go out in general is really more of a treat for me, as opposed to just being able to go out when and where I want to. I guess that also answers the question of what environment do I live in. I live in more of a town or city environment, and as far as the nature around me, being in Southern California, it's more of a beach and desert, sagebrushy, that type of environment. And while that's pretty in its own right and in and of itself. I've never really connected to beachy, deserty landscapes. As pretty as they are, I've always felt more of a connection to woodlands and fields and things like that. Someday I hope to live closer to natural environments like that, where I can go walk out in the woods safely, trails that are frequented also by other nature lovers or hikers, because obviously if you're going to be venturing out into nature that is naturey and sort of off the grid, you want to do so safely in case if you could encounter wild animals, or there's a reason that a lot of horror stories are set off in the woods or off in nature where there aren't really a lot of people around, unless it's an area you know well or is close to some sort of civilization where you could go for help. Don't go out into the woods or out into the desert or nature by yourself. Go with friends or with a group. Just be safe is my advice. If you're going to go out into any sort of natural environment, do so safely and wisely. I try to incorporate nature as best I can into my practice, but like I said, the nature that I currently live around, I've never really felt that strong of a connection to. I will ground a lot. I'll just go walk out in the grass barefoot or sit and meditate in it barefoot. So that's a way that I connect with nature. But as far as the landscape and environment that I live in, I don't really feel that strong of a connection to it. So I try and incorporate it as best I can, but given that I don't feel that strong of a connection to it, it feels a bit difficult to do so, even though it's a very pretty environment that I live in, but it's not necessarily one that I personally feel drawn towards. And speaking of feeling connected or disconnected to various things, another question that was posed to the Pagan Perspective channel over the past couple weeks is, what do you do when you feel disconnected from the gods? And how do you even define feeling connected to the gods? And for me, connecting to the gods is done mostly through my spell work and artwork, especially being a creative type, being a writer, being an actress. I feel connected to the gods when I am creating things, because creation is the source of all of existence. The gods create everything that's all around us, and so to me, connecting through creating my own work, that's how I connect to the gods. And to define the gods, to me, the gods feel more like friends or family members that I feel personal relationships with and connections to in that respect, as opposed to, for instance, in other religions where there's a disconnect between humans and the gods, in the sense that the gods are way up above us and we're just tiny, puny little humans that need to bow down to them and treat them as these lofty beings that are so much higher and so much grander than us. And yes, I feel that the gods deserve respect and honor in that sense, but I don't think that should come at the cost of degrading our own sense of self and sense of humanity as a whole. You wouldn't do that in your relationships with family members, in the sense you wouldn't feel the need to, in order to get close to family or friends, that you have to constantly beat yourself down and feel unworthy and so much lower than your family and friends. I mean, hopefully, ideally, I know not everyone has perfect, loving relationships with family or friends, and I hope that those relationships get healed if that's the case. But ideally, you wouldn't go around beating yourself up to feel close to the people you love and feel close to. So the gods, in my mind, shouldn't be any different in that respect. My advice, if you're feeling disconnected from the gods, ask them. Sit down and meditate and say, hey, goddess, god, or if you're someone who doesn't practice with any particular deity or deities, Just sit down and go, hey universe, I'm feeling disconnected, help me out here, give me some signs. And if you really pay attention and look for signs, you'll find them and they'll come to you. It can be as simple as sitting outside barefoot and feeling the grass and the earth between your toes and under your feet, and just feeling the sunshine come down from up above, or the clouds and the gloom if it's a gloomy day out. Connect with the weather that day and the energy of the weather and the seasons and stuff like that. Or sit and listen to music or look at artwork that makes you think of whatever source that you work with, whether it's particular gods and goddesses or the universe in general. And lastly, the third question I'm going to be answering in this video talks about comparing your practice with others' practices or paths, and do we think that's a good thing or a detrimental thing? I think that comparing paths is good in a certain sense. Like the Pagan Perspective channel, it features people from all different types of pagan paths, and so by its very nature it's going to compare different paths. And so I think that's great. I think when people can come together in conversation, in open, friendly conversations, and talk about their paths, and in doing so reveal comparisons or differences just by talking about them, I think that's great. I think that's healthy. It opens up dialogue, especially if it's with people who are from different spiritual paths completely. For instance, pagan and Christians talking to each other, even though some Christians see talking as opportunities to try to convert, so they don't really want to talk, they just want to convert people. I think friendly, open discussions are wonderful, healthy things. But with that said, I think that whatever spiritual path you follow, you should be careful about comparing your path to others in a negative sense. And what I mean by that is, it's not good to sort of beat yourself up and go like, well, because my path isn't like so-and-so's or like this certain path, if I admire this certain path and because my practice isn't like that, that means I'm doing things wrong, or I need to change my path or whatever. That's not a good thing. And I also think it's not a good thing to dwell on differences in paths in ways that get you angry, in a way that wastes energy. For instance, I know a lot of pagans and witches and people in the witchcraft community get angry when people both inside and outside of the witchcraft community say, oh, witchcraft is about devil worship, and confuse being witches or pagans with being Satanists, or even being like, oh, because I'm a witch I have to be a satanic witch because witchcraft is about devil worship, and that's the only way that I can practice that is through being a Satanist or whatever. And that's not a good thing either, because witchcraft and Satanism are not the same things. I know some people may claim that they are, and for those people, I'm sorry, but you guys don't know what witchcraft is. Witchcraft has nothing to do with Satanism. Witchcraft is about embracing nature and connecting with the universe as a whole, or the gods as a whole, if your path deals with deity. But it doesn't have anything to do with being a devil worshiper or being an atheistic Satanist. So yeah, it's not good to get angry about those sorts of things as a pagan, unless, here's my thing, unless you're directly confronted about that and someone's being a jerk to you and being like, oh, well, you're a pagan or witch, that means you're a devil worshiper, or oh, you are a pagan who works with the Norse deities and mythology, that means you're a neo-Nazi. And unless someone's directly accusing you of that or confronting you about those things, don't get worked up about it. Defend yourself when need be, and otherwise just let that stuff go, because living your path as you live it, as the best, kindest, most loving version of yourself that you can be, that will speak for itself. You don't need to always go out guns blazing like, oh, we're not devil worshippers, we're not neo-Nazis and those types of things, because that just drains your energy when you could be focusing it on just being yourself and living your life as you live it and letting that speak for itself. I think that comparing your path to others, it can be good or bad depending on the situation and how that comparison is being made. Just like witchcraft can be negative or positive depending on how it's used and directed. So those are my thoughts on the past few questions in the Pagan Perspective YouTube channel. And next time I will be discussing pagan music and musical artists or songs that I enjoy, because that was another question posed within the past month. I have so much to say on that. It could be a whole separate video in and of itself, and it's going to be, I think, quite a long video because I have a lot to say about that topic. But with these few questions, I had shorter answers, and so I decided to just combine them all into one video. With that, what are your thoughts on these topics? And thank you for watching, and please feel free to follow me on all my other socials, which are linked below. And if you're new to this channel, and if you like what you see, please feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll know when I upload. Thank you for watching, and blessed be.